Welcome to Datagrams, where I teach through stories, and today I'm doing just that. Today's lesson can change your entire life for the better, and ignoring it can change it for the worst. Now, I can tell you this lesson in 6 simple words, and I will, but not yet. I'm going to explain it to you through some real life examples from my experiences back when I was in high school and college, throughout my career in the Navy, and even now that I'm retired. I'm going to tell you these stories because that's what I do, but also by hearing stories, the things I will teach you will make more sense, they will implant deeper and stay with you longer, and hopefully make a positive change that will help you win in life. I'm Jason M. Garrett, a retired Navy commander and pilot. I'm also a dad who created Datagrams to keep teaching my children how to win in life. And of course, each and every one of you are invited in as well. So in my first story, I'm going to tell you about my dogs from when I was in high school and college. Now, if you think this won't offer anything that you can learn from, just bear with me. Listen to the story for a moment, and I think it'll make a lot more sense to you. Now, we had 2 dogs, Jenny, who was the mom, and Jack. They were both Shelties and getting up there in age. At least Jenny was. She was close to being elderly and lived a pretty sedentary life. No running, just kind of laying around the back door looking to get petted on occasion. And Jack, who was young and should have been energetic, wasn't. He followed his mom's lead, was with her every moment while they ate and slept and otherwise just kind of laid around. And so as a result, he was fat and lazy. So those were our 2 dogs. Now let me introduce you to another dog. During this time, during a blazing hot Kansas summer, while I visited a friend who lived in town, we noticed through a chain link fence a dog that was tied up in the neighbor's backyard. It was tied to a stake, mournfully crying for help. We took a look, and it was a big chow tied to a stake with about 2 feet of rope. 2 feet of rope. That was all the room this poor dog had to walk around. We looked at the dog's water bowl, and it was completely empty. With it being so scorching hot out there, and with her long coat on, she was quite literally dying a slow death. It was absolutely cruel. And if this wasn't bad enough, the dog's ears were swarmed by flies, and the tips had been eaten away and were bleeding. It broke our hearts. So what do 2 college kids do? Well, we stretched across the fence and we filled the water bowl several times as she just lapped it down. But then, when we were reaching over the fence trying to apply Vaseline to the tips of her ears so that the flies would stay off of it, suddenly the back porch door slammed open. This guy came walking right out to us, screaming and yelling at us for us to get the hell away from his dog. Now, we tried to explain exactly what we were doing, and much to my surprise, the guy actually stopped and listened to what we were saying. After a moment of listening, he simply said the following words. The dog's name is Sheba. She was named after the Queen of Sheba in the Bible, and she's a pain in the ass. She's going on a long ride out in the country with me and my shotgun tomorrow. If you want her, take her. Otherwise, she's dead. Well, as it turns out, my friend got a new dog, Sheba. And my friend had her hands full. The dog was big, strong, ate like a horse, and could not be contained. It wanted to run constantly, run, run, run. And as my friend lived in town, was a college student, and had a full-time job working her way through college, it became an instant problem. So, one fateful day, she brought Sheba out to my house, my parents' house, to run and ultimately stay. Now, my parents have a 7-acre estate, and all the neighbors do too. So there's a lot of open area for Sheba to be able to run. And oh my goodness, did she run. I can still remember that day when we brought her out and fed her right there at the garage door. Jenny and Jack didn't like this at all. There was a big strange dog there, so there was a lot of growling and snarling, but Sheba didn't seem to mind or notice at all. After she ate, we unleashed her, and off like a shot, that dog took off running in all different directions at the same time, it seemed, just wanting to explore everything. And she ran, and she ran, and she ran. She ran all day long, nonstop. That evening, when it was starting to get dark, I went outside and started calling for her. And like a ghost out of the darkness, here she came. She ran right up to the food bowl that I just laid out for her, crashed to the ground, and I, honest to God, thought she had died. I thought she was dead from exhaustion, except that she was snoring so loud. That was the obvious giveaway that she had just ran herself into exhaustion. Now, when I got up the next day, she was already out running. She only ever seemed to stop running to eat and to drink. Now, here's the thing. Jenny would bark at Sheba a bit, but Jack would be bold enough to actually chase after her for a little bit. He didn't last very long, though, being kind of fat and lazy, and he just was totally out of shape and could not run. But as the months went on, he began to run longer and longer and longer after her until after a while he was running with her stride for stride all day long. And the amazing thing was he went from being a big, plump sized Sheltie to a big, muscular looking Sheltie. He lost all of his weight and literally rippled muscle. And that dog could run with Sheba all day long and then some. The only time he wasn't running with her was when they were both in the garage sleeping right next to Jenny. It was the first time I ever saw the principle of you are who you run with. Those 6 words I promised you earlier played out in front of my eyes. And it certainly was not going to be the last. Now, they say you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that's probably the case. But I think there's much more to it than that. Consider, when I was 8, my dad got a promotion for his job. He went from working on trains for Santa Fe Railroad to driving trains as an engineer for them. And because of the promotion, halfway through my 3rd grade year, I went from a big school to a small school in a small town that we just moved to. And we stayed there in that small town for about a decade. And I have since learned, after some reflection, that we aren't just the average of the 5 people we hang out with the most, but your neighborhood, your school, and your community have a huge influence on you as well. I always told people that I was going to be a pilot and an astronaut and study astronomy. It was my dream ever since I was born, for all I know. After all, I was born into a house right across the street from an Air Force base, and I was heavily influenced by all the aircraft that flew overhead. Air Force heavies, like the C-5 Galaxy that seemed to always be flying off the field, Army sky cranes from the Air National Guard unit that was there. I just loved to watch them hover. And oh, the best of the best, the Blue Angels, who came every September for the big air show. I wanted to fly, and I was always encouraged to pursue my dreams. That was just normal before the move. But when I got to my new school in 3rd grade, they tried to put me in my place, telling me that my dreams were impossible and that I could never do it. And they wore me down. Over time, over a decade, I began to think the way they did. And as I proceeded through my junior year of high school, I started weighing my options. My dad had the best paying job you could probably get in that small town, working for the railroad. But his job had once again transferred him, and he was driving 100 miles away each way just to be able to go to work. And in truth, I never seriously considered working for the railroad. It just didn't seem realistic. I started asking about manufacturing jobs in the good places in Emporia, the city nearby. There were really 2 places that you could go to make really good money. Dolly Madison, which made donuts and Twinkies and that kind of thing, or Iowa beef packing, slaughtering cattle and processing the meat. Can you imagine that? Those were my 2 choices. They were everybody's choices, as it turns out, unless you were a farmer or a rancher, I guess. Iowa beef paid super good, but it was a frightening place to think about working. My friend's parents worked there, and they looked like they had been drugged through hell. Their hands actually were kind of curled, perpetually curled, over time from holding knives that they worked with for hours upon hours, year over year. And they had scars in their thighs from when their arms would get tired and they'd lower their arms, they'd actually impale themselves in their own thighs. I heard rumors of unsafe working conditions where people were killed on the job, crushed in heavy equipment, electrocuted working on the bright overhead lights, and on and on. And get this is a little gross. The damn factory would drain all the blood from those dead cows and boil it down to solid parts for fertilizer. And the entire downtown of Emporia, Kansas smelled like boiled blood. The smell just made you want to vomit. Working there sounded like absolute hell. But it actually paid really, really good. And I was listening, and I was thinking, and I was considering, and I was being swayed. And one day, out of the blue, a nightmare happened. Or a miracle happened, depending on how you look at it, I guess. I can still remember the day. We were all in the car headed home, and my mom kind of nonchalantly says, "Hey kids, guess what? We're going to be moving over the summer." What? Where was the logical question? After all, this was our hometown. We certainly weren't leaving, right? Maybe just moving to a different house or something. This was where my friends were. This is where I was going to be starting my senior year in high school, and I'd be graduating next year. They told us we'd be moving 100 miles away near a city called Lawrence, Kansas. My thought? No. And hell no. That's nowhere near my friends, and this isn't going to work. And my sister and I both absolutely pitched a fit about it. And you know what? Just a few short months later, we were going through orientation at our new high school 100 miles away in Eudora, Kansas. It was 10 miles outside of Lawrence, Kansas, and 10 miles outside of the University of Kansas, the home of the Jayhawks. Folks, I cannot overstate the influence of Eudora and the people I went to school with there. To this day, I still thank my parents for making the greatest decision in my life to move away from that one small town to a totally different world. Suddenly, I was around a whole new class of kids who seemed to be all intent on going to college and had big dreams of becoming doctors and engineers, lawyers, accountants, business owners, professionals of all types. They were determined, they were driven, they were dreaming big, and they were making it happen. In my old school, very few talked about college, and if they did, it was all about which football team they were rooting for, KU or K-State. Take your pick. When I was hanging out with my new friends in my new school, the jocks on the football team and the wrestling team with me, by the way, they weren't talking about getting a manufacturing job at a meatpacking plant next year. They were talking about what they got on their ACTs and which colleges they were applying for. Now, to tell you how ignorant I was, I didn't even know what an ACT was. When they said it was a test you take in order to get in college, I laughed at them and said, "You idiots, you don't take a test to go to college. You pay to go to college." Obviously. That shows you how little I knew halfway through my senior year. After all, I hadn't known any college graduates, except the teachers of my old school who rarely encouraged me to succeed. My parents were successful in what they did, but neither of them had gone to college and they didn't know how it worked. I had a lot to figure out, but I was around the right people now, the right influences, and the rest, as they say, is history. I went to KU. I majored in astronomy, a degree I had totally forgotten until about 2 years into college. After graduation, I got commissioned in the U.S. Navy, went to flight school, and flew as a Navy pilot my entire career. And while I didn't become an astronaut, well, I still achieved a lot more than most, and I still have very big dreams that I am pursuing even at this time. For so many young folks out there, you can't appreciate how influenced you are by those you run with. And consider my wife, Kristen, as another great example. Her grandfather was a corpsman in the Navy in World War II and a Pearl Harbor survivor. And her grandmother was a Navy wave in World War II. Her dad was also in the Navy, an A-4 Skyhawk pilot in Vietnam and an A-7 Corsair pilot after that. And her mom was in the Navy, a Navy nurse. So it only made sense that she wanted to be in the Navy like her family and was inspired to fly like her dad. And that's what she did, being among the first women accepted into flying combat-capable aircraft in the mid-1990s. And we know how important this concept is in the Navy. You are who you run with. In my helicopter community, where we flew the SA-60 Bravo Seahawk, we deployed on small ships as detachments of between 19 and 25 officers and enlisted sailors. It was just us, a detachment team, for 6 to 9 months on the ship. The rest of the squadron stayed ashore. And we knew through experience what an incredible team we would become. Enlisted or officer, it didn't matter a bit. When you were in that position in your career that you were going out on long cruise, you were already among some of the hardest working and most dedicated people in the world, each fully committed to the job of defending our nation. But sometimes, despite having gone through boot camp and a lot of training, some of our most junior sailors weren't necessarily there yet, and they were heavily influenced by those they ran with, sometimes friends they found outside of the Navy lifelines. That's why before we head out to sea on workups or long cruise, we keep an eye out for any sailor who may be running with the wrong crowd and about to get into a whole bunch of trouble. Whether it's drugs, theft, blowing their money at the bars or strip clubs or whatever, if we take them to sea with one of those outstanding detachments, they quickly grow into high-performance men and women, just the type we need in the U.S. Navy. After 6 months of running with a detachment of incredible sailors, the change in these individuals can be simply astounding. I had one sailor who was getting into so much trouble drinking and raising hell, he was doomed to a future court-martial and time in the brig. And he was as worthless as they come when it came to his work ethic. So, my boss, the squadron commanding officer, told us that we were taking him to sea so we could fix him. 6 months later, when he came home from long cruise deployment, he wasn't even the same kid. He had made a 180-degree turn and was an absolute superstar in every way. 4 months after returning from sea, he was awarded Squadron Sailor of the Year, a huge award for anyone, much less him. And a few months after that, he went up against the other Sailors of the Year from the other 5 squadrons in the wing and ultimately won Wing Sailor of the Year. That was the impact that going to sea and running with an outstanding team had on him. You are who you run with. It has always been that way. Now I'm trying to think about me and who influences me. You see, I'm retired from the Navy now, about 9 months ago, and I don't have daily association with the best of the best, quite like I did at that time. No one who elevates me, who causes me to aspire to greater things. Now, I do learn a lot, and in some ways, I am influenced a lot. I read books or listen to audiobooks all the time, perhaps 40 or 50 a year, and I have those authors and their bright minds as influences in my life. And I listen to podcasts and YouTube videos, no goofy cat videos or TikTok humor or anything like that. I'm only listening to the highest level of education on topics I'm looking to excel in. So these are all good. They're helpful, but I think I need more. I'm reminded of that scene from the movie Good Will Hunting, where the psychiatrist, Sean, asks the main character, Will, who's your soulmate? Who challenges you? And Will starts listing off folks like Shakespeare, Nietzsche, Frost, O'Connor, Kant, Pope, Locke. And Sean says, that's great, Will. That's great. They're all dead. And Will says, not to me, they're not. And Sean says, yeah, but you don't have a dialogue with them. You can't get back to them, Will. And that's right. There isn't any two-way dialogue here. I listen to all these carefully selected influences, consider and learn, and at best use my wife as a sounding board for my ideas, and then listen to her thoughts. And that's kind of the routine now, but I'm not sure that's enough. So I'm going to start attending educational events, conferences, seminars to meet people who are more successful than me so I can start running with a new elite crowd. I'm looking, I'm searching because I really know how important it is to find the right crowd to run with. And now you do too. Be selective. Pick those that are running in the right direction that you want to go and make the hard and possibly painful decision to run away from those who don't lead you toward your future success. This is great gouge that can help you win in life. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I've got for you. You are who you run with, and you need to run with winners in order to win. And that's an important thing to know. If you want to keep getting life's lessons like this that are timeless and will help you win in life, subscribe to this channel and go back and watch an old datagram. Unlike a lot of YouTube videos that will tell you what to think based on something that happened last week, all of these datagrams are timeless. Until next time, compete hard, run with the winners, and win in life. Thank you.